Good day everyone, this is Erica Moore Otagan and welcome to my YouTube channel. For today's content, we are going to have an educational vlog and we are going to tackle about the nutrient cycle. So let's get started. So what is a nutrient cycle? A nutrient cycle is defined as the cyclic pathway by which nutrients pass through in order to be recycled and reutilized. So the pathway comprises cells, organisms, community, and ecosystem. In the process, nutrients get absorbed, transferred, released, and reabsorbed. It is a natural recycling system of mineral nutrients. The nutrient cycle is a system where energy and matter are transferred between living organisms and non-living parts of the environment. This occurs as animals and plants consume nutrients found in the soil, and these nutrients are then released back into the environment via death and decomposition, and the cycle continues. Soil microbes play an important role in nutrients recycling. They decompose organic matter to release nutrients. They are also important to trap and transform nutrients into the soil, which can be taken up by plant roots. Nutrient cycling is a cyclic process that encompasses the movement of nutrients from the physical environment to living organisms and back to the environment. Nutrients are present on the earth where they are recycled, transformed into different forms, and reutilized. Nutrient cycling is one of the most important processes that occur in an ecosystem. The nutrient cycle describes the use, movement, and recycling of nutrients in the environment. Valuable elements such as carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, phosphorus, and nitrogen are essential to life and must be recycled in order for organisms to exist. Nutrient cycles are inclusive of both living and non-living components and involve biological, geological, and chemical processes. For this reason, these nutrient circuits are known as biogeochemical cycles. Biogeochemical cycles can be categorized into two main types: global cycles and local cycles. Elements such as carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen are recycled through abiotic environments, including the atmosphere, water, and soil. Since the atmosphere is the main abiotic environment from which these elements are harvested, their cycles are of a global nature. These elements may travel over large distances before they are taken up by biological organisms. The soil is the main abiotic environment for the recycling of elements such as phosphorus, calcium, and potassium. As such, their movement is typically over a local region. In nutrient cycle, there are elements that are important to be recycled. First is the carbon cycle. Carbon is essential to all life, as it is the main constituent of living organisms. It serves as the backbone component for all organic polymers, including carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Carbon compounds such as carbon dioxide or CO2 and methane or CH4 circulate in the atmosphere and influence global climates. Carbon is circulated between living and non-living components of the ecosystem, primarily through the processes of photosynthesis and respiration. Plants and other photosynthetic organisms obtain CO2 from their environment and use it to build biological materials. Plants, Animals and decomposers such as bacteria and fungi return CO2 to the atmosphere through respiration. The movement of carbon through biotic components of the environment is known as the fast carbon cycle. It takes considerably less time for carbon to move through the biotic elements of the cycle than it takes for it to move through the abiotic elements. It can take as long as 200 million years for carbon to move through abiotic elements such as rocks, soil, and oceans. Thus, this circulation of carbon is known as the slow carbon cycle. In carbon cycle, CO2 is removed from the atmosphere by photosynthetic organisms such as plants, cyanobacteria, etc., and used to generate organic molecules and build biological mass. Then animals consume the photosynthetic organisms and acquire the carbon stored within the producers. CO2 is returned to the atmosphere via respiration in all living organisms. Decomposers break down dead and decaying organic matter and release CO2. Some CO2 is returned to the atmosphere via the burning of organic matter such as forest fires. Then CO2 trapped in rock or fossil fuels can be returned to the atmosphere via erosion, volcanic eruptions, or fossil fuel combustion. Nitrogen cycle. Similar to carbon, nitrogen is a necessary component of biological molecules. Some of these molecules include amino acids and nucleic acids. Although nitrogen is abundant in the atmosphere, most living organisms cannot use nitrogen in this form to synthesize organic compounds. Atmospheric nitrogen must first be fixed or converted to ammonia or NH3 by certain bacteria. In nitrogen cycle, atmospheric nitrogen or N2 is converted to ammonia or NH3 by nitrogen-fixing bacteria. In aquatic and soil environments, these organisms use nitrogen to synthesize the biological molecules they need to survive. NH3 is subsequently converted to nitrite and nitrate by bacteria known as nitrifying bacteria. Plants obtain nitrogen from the soil by absorbing ammonium and nitrate through their roots. Nitrate and ammonium are used to produce organic compounds. Nitrogen in its organic form is obtained by animals when they consume plants or animals. Decomposers return NH3 to the soil by decomposing solid waste and dead or decaying matter. Nitrifying bacteria convert NH3 to nitrite and nitrate. Denitrifying bacteria convert nitrite and nitrate to N2, releasing N2 back into the atmosphere. Water is an essential element for life to exist on Earth. When warmed by the sun, water on the surface of oceans and freshwater bodies evaporates, forming a vapor. This is a process called evaporation. Then, water vapor rises into the atmosphere, where it condenses, forming clouds. This is a process called condensation. It then falls back to the ground as precipitation. Most precipitation lands in the oceans. Precipitation that falls onto land flows into rivers, streams, and lakes. Some of it seeps into the soil where it is held underground as groundwater. Oxygen cycle. Oxygen is an element that is essential to biological organisms. The vast majority of atmospheric oxygen, or O2, is derived from photosynthesis. Plants and other photosynthetic organisms use CO2 water, and light energy to produce glucose and O2. Glucose is used to synthesize organic molecules, while O2 is released into the atmosphere. Oxygen is removed from the atmosphere through decomposition processes and respiration in living organisms. Phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus is a component of biological molecules such as RNA, DNA, phospholipids, and adenosine triphosphate or ATP. ATP is a high-energy molecule produced by the processes of cellular respiration and fermentation. In the phosphorus cycle, phosphorus is circulated mainly through soil, rocks, and water and living organisms. Phosphorus is found originally in the form of phosphate ion. Phosphorus is added to soil and water by runoff, resulting from the weathering of rocks that contain phosphates. Phosphate ion is absorbed from the soil by plants and obtained by consumers through the consumption of plants and other animals. Phosphates are added back to the soil through decomposition. Phosphates may also become trapped in sediments in aquatic environments. These phosphate-containing sediments form new rocks over time. All living organisms, biomolecules, and cells are made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus. These elements are essential for life. It is important to recycle and continuously replenish nutrients into the environment for life to exist. Nutrient cycling is important, for it is required for the transformation of nutrients from one form to another so that it can be readily utilized by different organisms. Like plants, they cannot take atmospheric nitrogen, and it has to be fixed and converted to ammonium and nitrate for uptake. Nutrient cycling is also important for transfer of nutrients from one place to another for utilization, like air to soil or water. Nutrient cycles keep the ecosystem in equilibrium and help in storing nutrients for future uptake. Also, through nutrient cycling, living organisms interact with the abiotic components of their surroundings. How humans influence nutrient cycles? As discussed, nutrients are continuously recycled in a natural ecosystem. In recent decades, population growth and resulting human activities such as large-scale farming have caused some significant changes in nutrient cycles. Essentially, the human alterations to the nutrient cycle leads to an excess of nutrients in aquatic ecosystems and a serious lack of nutrients in agriculture. Worldwide, more and more soils are depleted of nutrients, with serious consequences to agriculture production and food security. These human-induced alterations in the nutrient cycles lead to an imbalance in the availability of nutrients, whose consequences, in particular with regard to water, are depletion of soils, depletion of nutrient sources, affordability and food security, and eutrophication of waterways and dead zones. So that's all for this video. I hope you guys learned a lot about our discussion for today about the nutrient cycle. So keep safe everyone, and let's learn every day.